Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray,
And I'm Chris.
and today we're going to dive into the 2024 presidential election. And we're not really going to so much be looking at it from a political angle as much as a history angle, looking at it from the standpoint of this has been unexpectedly for me, Chris, a election that has a potential for to go down in history for some very different things happening. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is that right now, here we are in beginning of October, and many people would say that based on predictions and prognosticators and all, it could come down to being one of the closest election races ever. So you have that going for it. But the other thing is it's full of twists and turns and, bumps. And we have experienced not one, but two attempted assassinations on a candidate. We have experienced some changing of positions on both sides. We have some very few one-on-one encounters between the candidates. We've had one presidential debate, one vice presidential debate.
Mhm.
So the American public probably will have an election based solely on constituents talking or advertisements or basically who you really, really can't stand. The choicer, the lesser of the two evils, I guess, is what this is going to come down to. So it's a unusual and unique campaign season.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's one of those times in history where the country is so divided, it's so split almost down the middle that, both candidates are pretty much guaranteed what 48, 49% of the vote. And you've got very little room in there for some for wiggle room for someone to really sort of take off. There's very little wiggle room. So like you said, here we are, it's approaching mid-October already, and we don't have a clear winner. I was looking at some polls right before we went on, Chris, and it's neck and neck. I mean, it's very close.
And what we also have to remember, and this is something that has been in the past, but one person could have 51% of the general population.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean they're going to win because it comes down to the electoral college, where you need 270 electoral college votes based on states and state population to become the next president. And to the point where there's been a lot of discussion about one little electoral vote out of Nebraska. And,
Mhm.
that in Nebraska and I think it's Maine, I might be wrong, but I think it's Maine
Same.
and Nebraska split their state electoral votes based on percentages of who's got the most. And so that one vote could determine if somebody gets 270. And, I mean, I do think we could get to the same place where we were. I guess it was the same way with when Trump won first, where he lost the popular vote, but yet won the electoral college.
Well, I think we could go even further back and go to 2000, where it was basically a tie. And, Bush won, what was it, 271 votes. And without Florida, he wouldn't have won it. That's why Florida became so important.
Yeah, and that, as some people will say today, we've done an episode on
Yeah.
that. But,
Yeah.
some people would say that the Supreme Court was the one who ultimately chose who the president was. And as much as people were upset at Donald Trump kind of quote stacking the court with the change of Roe v. Wade and things of that nature, it could very well come down to the Supreme Court being put in an untenable position of having to once again step in and make a decision as far as president. And yes, it's what 6-3, I guess, technically, if you look at it, I guess, but I don't know if it would wind up being a 6-3 vote for uh, Trump presidency.
You
We
never know.
the court is the court is not 100% united on
Right.
all things. There's been some unique things by the Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Gorsuch. Even Justice Barrett, the last one that was put on there, made a change on some key decisions. So not everybody's in Trump's favor, if you will, but I think that what is also going to probably carry the stage that we haven't seen in a long time is that there's more attention on the vice presidential candidates.
Hmm.
You look at the Republican side, Trump will be close to 80, I think, when if he was to take office and win. There is a distinct possibility, having seen what's happened these last 4 years with President Biden, that the vice president might have to take more of a role. That probably matters to some of these undecided voters.
Yeah, and I think that's why, just looking at the Trump side, we can come to the Harris side in a second. I think that's sort of why Trump maybe went with a younger person. I think JD Vance is what, 39, 40 years old. So going with someone who's younger, does provide that balance just in case, just in case, Trump's health fails, or, when you're approaching 80, a lot of things can happen, and it can happen really quick. So having someone on the ticket that's much younger, 39, 40 years old, can certainly provide a level of comfort to people, I think.
And also politics goes into that also. I will go to the Democratic side, and Harris was struggling between the choice of a governor in Pennsylvania versus the governor of Minnesota. And a lot of people now, which is interesting, but there are some people who are second guessing her choice, that she did not go to the governor of Pennsylvania, which is a battleground state, if you will. That is, it could very well decide the presidency. And she kind of went with Minnesota, which I don't know if that's really going to be a battleground state. Nobody's really going out there, but a lot of people are spending time in Pennsylvania. And so if she would have picked the governor of Pennsylvania, would that have given her some more votes? Maybe it would have, but
Right.
politics is why she went the way that she did. And as I
Mhm.
said, I have heard just in reading some of the articles that some people are second guessing that.
Yeah. And I look at her and Waltz, I don't know their individual ages, but it does sort of remind me in a sense of Bush Cheney, where you have the head of the ticket being a little younger, the vice president being a little bit more experienced. The same with Obama Biden. You have Obama being the younger one, Biden being the older one. So I don't know it. I don't know where the ages of Walls and Harris are, but just looking at them, it sort of reminds me a little bit of that. But you mentioned a few minutes ago about the Supreme Court getting involved and the Electoral College, the way they allocate their votes in Nebraska and Maine. Here's something that I have never thought I would live to see the day where I could say this is a realistic possibility. What if nobody gets to 270? What if they both stall out at 269, which could happen? Or it could just simply be that nobody gets to 270 for some reason, or they tie at 269, and that raises some very interesting issues, especially in our day and time, because it's something that has happened before where either nobody got to the majority, not 270. That was in 1824 when you had four candidates, well, five candidates, and nobody got to the majority. It also happened in 1800 with Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson tied. Both of those, the presidency had to be decided in the House of Representatives, and that would be what would happen today if neither Harris nor Trump were to get to 270. The House of Representatives would decide the presidency, and each state would get a single vote, which I think the way I calculate it would favor Trump. But then the vice presidency would go to the Senate, where you would the senators would vote, and to become vice president, you would have to get 51 senators to vote for you, which could, the way I'm thinking about it, result in a Trump Walls White House.
And I was sitting there during the vice presidential debate the other week, and I thought that debate was more of a policy driven debate by two
Yep.
individuals who were focused on policy rather than the first one, which the presidential debate was focused on attacks by both.
Yeah.
I got to thinking, you know, they're you know, I don't know how to say this, but yeah, just switch, like if both parties
Mm-hmm.
decided, I mean, let's flip it around. We're gonna go with Vance Trump and Waltz Harris. I mean, I will say, and I'm not speaking on either side for any candidate, but if you take that debate that Senator Vance had the other night, oh, I'm sure that he would bring alongside people from
Mm-hmm.
all parties and even the independents because he was very polished, he was very political, he reminded me of the debate with Kennedy and Nixon,
Yeah.
where you have Kennedy, who was younger, who came across as more likable. People were, and that's what won that debate. That debate was won because Kennedy was first colored television debate.
Right.
And he won because he looked good, he sounded good, and he spoke like he knew what he was talking about. And if you compare these things. I mean, on both sides, Trump has said some things that are off the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Harris has said some things that are off the wall. You have these off the wall presidential candidates who are not really honed in on political expertise, but yet you've got a former governor in Waltz who is, got his views, but he can articulate them.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have this Senator Vance, who is for the youngest one out of all four of them.
Mm-hmm.
Man, sure does talk a good talk.
Yeah, I will tell you, he far exceeded anything I was expecting from him. When I saw his performance in that debate, I was, I must admit, I was not expecting that. I,
Yeah.
I was expecting, well, first thing, I was expecting another Trump Biden type debate where they just bickered with each other. Remember in 2020, Biden and Trump, I think it was the first debate they had, they were just basically on stage yelling at each other the whole time. That's sort of what I expected here when the Vance Walls debate, but you didn't get that. You got what you talked about the Kennedy Nixon debate, and that's absolutely very good analogy there. But you sort of reminded me of just a traditional debate, a traditional presidential debate. You go back to, you know, McCain, Obama, Reagan, Mondale. It was the same type of spirit there in the debate. At the end of the debate, the wives came up on stage, and everybody sort of stood there and chatted for a minute. Which we've gotten to the point, I think, in this country where we've forgotten how things used to be. And when I say how things used to be, I don't mean 150 years ago. I mean just a few years ago. And it was very nice to see the two candidates behave the way they did and perform the way they did and, at least pretend to be civil. I mean, that was, I think for me, and I think for a lot of people from what I'm hearing, I like a breath of fresh air.
So we talked about the historical aspect of this presidential election. Most presidential elections will have three debates. It's
Mhm.
usually what you see. We've had one presidential debate, one vice presidential debate. If you are either candidate, do you want another debate or are you ready to just let it be, and do your campaign stumps and social media and advertisements, or do you try to get out there one more time so that you can show what you've got in the same room as the other one?
I think I don't think there'll be another debate between Harris and Trump. I could be completely wrong, but I don't think either campaign's going to do it. If I was, I could see, the consensus after the Harris Trump debate was that Harris outperformed Trump for whatever that's worth. Um, you could make an argument maybe Trump wants to get out there and you do a redo just to sort of, like Reagan in 1980, his was it 1980 or no, it was 1984. His first debate against Mondale was not good. He did not perform well at all. His second debate with Mondale was the one where he made the comment about I will not use the youth and inexperience of my opponent for political purposes.
Right.
And Mondale later said, he knew at that moment he lost the election. So you could make an argument that Trump wants to do that, and that is get out there and let's do it again and show I can do better. Or you could make the argument that he's like, well, no, I don't want to risk it. go out there and do worse or just the same. And you could do the same with Harris on that as well. Well, I did fine. I don't need to prove myself again. Or come on, I'll knock you down again type of thing. So you could make an argument either way for both candidates, which is very interesting. But one of the things I wish that the campaigns had done was stuck to the traditional presidential commission on debate, the commission on presidential debates, and you'd have three presidential debates, uh, one sort of the podiums, one sit down, and one Q&A with the audience, and then you'd have one vice presidential debate. I wish they had done that instead of going with the network debates and the way they've done it. But
Yeah, because, well, and in today's society, you are beyond the point of ever having unbiased news.
right.
Yeah. Social media has just changed the concept of how you get your information from now on. I mean, the recent hurricane and the devastating effects in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida have shown the conspiracies run wild. The misinformation is there. And so, even with that debate, you have people saying the moderators are siding against this person, or the moderators are for the. I mean, it's hard to have that fair and unbalanced, fair and balanced approach. But I'm curious about one other thing that I'll ask you. If I thought we've talked about this early on in the election season, that if there was ever a point where a third party candidate was going to succeed, it was going to be this election.
Yeah.
You just had two. I mean, I think it's beyond even the Biden Trump campaigns, where they were just, or the Clinton Trump campaigns. I mean, a lot of people didn't like Clinton, didn't like Trump, didn't like Biden, didn't like Trump. You had to just vote. So this is the third election cycle now where Trump's been a candidate, and this is not directly related to Trump, but it's just the last three cycles. You've seen a lot of people say, I don't like either one.
Mm-hmm.
So I really thought this was going to be the year or the election where this third party candidate was going to rise up and have a stake. And, I mean, Kennedy Jr. stayed out there for a long time, but never got the percentage points that really was going to make a difference. He drops out. He has said he supports Trump, but I don't think we've seen a bump in Trump's numbers because of Kennedy.
Yeah, he didn't have much to bring to the table, did he?
No. And so, it just shows you the power of a Republican Party and a Democratic Party,
Mm-hmm.
because you had the opportunity. I thought, and this is just us speaking, but I thought that the senator from West Virginia, Manchin, who has come out and said, I don't like either one of you. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like the party of this, the party of that. I'm kind of in the middle. I thought he would come out and pull together somebody else, and that they would be the alternative voice, if you will. Having a Republican and a Democrat running on the same ticket would have been, if it was going to happen, it was going to be this year. It didn't happen. And there was no really, maybe it happens if Biden stays in the race. Maybe it happens a little bit more.
That
Uh, but yeah, it
well,
didn't.
that's where I was going with that was if I think if Biden had stayed in the race, maybe a third party would have been able to move. But it reminds me, I hadn't thought of them in a while, but the No Labels group. I don't know if you call them a party or what you call them. I know they were trying, but unfortunately, if you remember, Joe Lieberman passed away, I think this year, from a fall. And I think that probably took a lot of the steam out of that movement when you had his leadership in the movement, you know, that gap in the leadership in that movement. But I think it's possible if Biden had not withdrawn from the race, maybe a third party would have been able to gear up enough to make a difference. But, would they have been able to win? I don't know. But who would they have benefited? Would they have benefited Biden? Would they have benefited Trump? I don't know. One of the things I did want to talk about mentioning Biden dropping out is we've never seen that before. This late in the game, people talk about what was it, 19, I want to say it was 1960, where no, it was not 1960. Um, no, it was 1968 with Lyndon Baines Johnson. You know, he announced he would not seek the presidency, but that was like in March of that year. They had time to get a new candidate. In that case, it was Richard Nixon, who had run in 1960. Um, but this sort of changing horses in, was it July when Biden dropped out? That's unprecedented in American history. You got to be careful when you say unprecedented in American history, because the way we get to nominees through the primary process and all of that is different from the way it was done, in the early 20th century backwards. But still, it's very unusual to see a candidate, and not very unusual in our day and time. It's unheard of to see a candidate switch that late in the game.
Especially a candidate who ran the against Joe Biden in 2020 primary for the presidency and was one of
Yep.
the first ones to drop out, and had terrible numbers. And, it's so interesting is that you have a vice president who was kind of in the background, really didn't have a lot of attention, not saying good or bad, but just was out back in the background, and yet comes out all of a sudden, doesn't get a single vote for president in this election, but yet is the
Mhm.
nominee for the Democrat Party and is, as you say, polling at 48, 49% of the general electorate. Um, it's interesting. But I am thankful for this year because, I will say that every 4 years is when I really enjoy Saturday Night Live. And I think that this presidential election, they've had so much that they could use, and they've done it very well. And I will say, because they've been very bipartisan on
Yep.
the jokes this year. And I was looking at a clip today from the Saturday Night Live, which was, you know, making fun of the particular candidates, and it's good humor. It's good, I mean, because let's be honest, I think everybody would say this isn't the presidential candidates we were hoping for to lead us into the upcoming years. And I say that for both sides. It doesn't matter which one you're talking about, because you don't have an Eisenhower, you don't have a Reagan, you don't have I would say an Obama who comes in with,
You don't even have a
Trump,
George Bush.
Bush. I was trying to make sure Kennedy, I need to
Yeah.
put some Democrats in there with some Republicans, but
Yeah.
you don't have a statesman, is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
statesperson. You don't have one of those. And, I think we do have some of the stronger vice presidential candidates this year than we've had in the past. I mean, no disrespect to those vice presidents before, but I think these two will probably have more of an impact in affairs in the White House than previous ones.
Yeah, I mean, they're both, like I said when we talked about that debate. That was very, very, very good debate. And you had said something that triggered. Oh, Saturday Night Live. My favorite Saturday Night Live was from 2008. No, it was 2016. They mocked Sarah Palin's endorsement of Donald Trump. That was the funniest thing I ever saw in my life. And the crazy thing about it was there's moments where it like, wait a minute, am I watching Saturday Night Live or is this real? And it
Well,
was
and
funny.
what's great, yeah, because what's great is, Saturday Night Live, what makes it so great is there's been skits in which say the actress for Sarah Palin
Mhm.
has done her skit with the real Sarah
Yeah.
Palin.
Yep.
It's done that way with Hillary Clinton also.
Yeah. I remember the one with Hillary at the bar. It was Hillary behind the bar and Hillary at the bar. Yeah.
Right. And it's just there's good ones. And so, it'll be interesting to allow, because honestly, we are in scary times, no matter how you want to look at it. In our society, you have a looming Mideast war, you have, people striking, you have uncertainty just with safety and economics. So every now and then you just do need to kind of take a step back and get a good laugh. But
Yeah,
Um,
you mentioned the seriousness of our times, and we are in serious times. You look at what's happened this week in Western North Carolina. You look at what's going on in Israel, Lebanon. You look at what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, and then there's other issues that don't get the attention. Um, and you look at the presidential candidates we have, and it is disappointing when you think, here's the time we need you mentioned Eisenhower. Here's the time we need a Roosevelt. Pick either Roosevelt. I don't care. Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, and we don't have that. It seems to me, even though the presidency right now is the strongest from a technical standpoint it has ever been in American history, which goes back to the book by Arthur Schlesinger. It was written, I think, back in the 70s or 80s, called The Imperial Presidency. Even though from that standpoint, the presidency is the most powerful it's ever been, on the other hand, I think the presidency is significantly weakened in recent years. And I think that the current two candidates show that, the presidency remains in one of its downturns, which has happened before. I mean, it's happened before, but you sort of wish at this moment we had that person, be they Democrat, Republican, we had that person who everybody could sort of look at and go, okay.
I would have loved to have seen how Teddy Roosevelt would have handled the longshoreman strike recently.
Yeah,
I,
be
because
interesting.
that would have been good made for TV right
Yeah.
there.
I wondered how I was thinking the other day, actually, how would he handle like gas prices and all that, all these profits from these companies, how he would deal with that. And it's like, that'd be right up his ballpark. He'd be like cracking his knuckles.
Or you bring in a Lincoln and how he would handle a foreign affair of
Yeah.
a major war that's going on over, um, and you look at FDR and his economic policies because he had to come in and save the
Hmm.
economy with the New Deal. I mean, you look at those things and you don't see a Lincoln, a Roosevelt, but you also have to see who you have and that this is what you've got, and
Yeah.
you have to make the best choice for the moment. And so I pray that America will make the right choice, whatever choice that is.
Hmm.
But my other prayer is that whatever choice is made, whoever gets 270, that the other 48, 49% of people in the United States accept whoever it is,
Yeah.
Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. You can complain all you want, but you still have to respect the office, respect the person in the office, and you have to move on. If
Yeah.
I hear one more time about the 2020 election, we're way past that. It's
Right.
time to move on. And so I do hope that whatever happens in 2024 in less than a month, we will come on board and we will move on, and America will be united.
Yeah. And I think that brings to one final point here. If you don't vote, don't complain. If you vote, like Chris said, and I hope you do vote, I hope every one of our listeners will go out and vote. We don't really care who you vote for, just go out and vote. Um, Vote so then you can have the right to complain when things are done that you don't like. No, I'm just kidding. Vote so that your voice will be heard and that you can be involved in a process. Chris, we both teach history, and we both know how many people throughout history haven't had the opportunity to vote for their leaders. They got leaders through birth, they got leaders through political or military intrigue, and here we get to choose our own leaders. So, definitely go out and vote. And like Chris said, once the vote is in, accept it and move on.
I agree with you. I think it's point well taken. I appreciate this episode. I think it was good for us to take a pause and just think about where we are. And the next uh the next month's going to be interesting. So I guess we would tell America, buckle up, because I promise you when it comes to the presidential election, there will be an October surprise.
An October surprise and a bumpy road. And Chris, it is October. You know what that means.
Means our listeners need to go ahead and be prepared because this is the month of spooky history stories.
that Chris doesn't like. All right. I hope everybody's enjoyed this episode. Please share this episode with your family and friends. Until next time, I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.
And talk to you later.